All right, starting off another week. So we looked at exterior detailing last week, or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, um, doing these trims and brackets and that sort of stuff. So this week, I want to finish up exterior detailing. Specifically, we're going to look at railings and exterior lights, all that sort of gingerbready kind of stuff. And we should be able to wrap up exterior detailing then. And then we're going to go after that. I talked about last week, but we'll do it next week. The doing 3D roofing details, and then after that we'll do 3D wall details, and then we'll jump into materials and getting pretty close to finishing up the house proper, and then we'll start getting into some site work stuff. So real quick, just as a note, I adjusted this model from the last time we looked at it just to have additional exterior detailing to add on. If you remember, this door and balcony was not there, but I added a balcony on just so we can add some railings and that kind of stuff. It doesn't really affect anything per se, but just gives me a place to add some details onto. So like a lot of things, it's all going to start becoming somewhat repetitive, meaning it really becomes the same techniques kind of over and over. And to start with, we're going to open up a file just like I do, like I work with a lot of detailing kind of things. I have, what I call my boneyard, all my leftover pieces from other projects. And this is a collection of railings. It's not comprehensive. There's a lot more I've done that I still need to get into here. But it's definitely a good place to start. And from there, we can edit and that sort of stuff. And really big picture goal is I would love to create kind of these drawings that have railings or any detail really broken down into specific architectural detailing styles. So we can open up a drawing that has Caribbean stuff, open up a drawing that has colonial stuff, etc., etc. But for now, it's kind of just this mishmash. And just to show it, in case I'll do it every class, I guess. But I have this library collection. This is my server, and I believe it's the same thing roughly. Let me see if I can open it up on server down there. We have our library SketchUp and then library collections. So this is the exact same thing as mine. It gets replicated down there. And so this is the one that we're looking at right now, this elevation railings. So with that said, I'm actually going to open up a second drawing that will kind of go along with this, but I'll get to that in a second. So railings, we're just going to grab a railing that'll work for this project. Actually, before I put it into my model, I'm going to show you basically my thought process of putting a railing together. It should be pretty straightforward for all of you by now. Even looking at, say, this one, I'm going to hide the model. We have a post, which, as you can imagine, this is a component, so that if I edit this one gets edited. And then a lot of times, we'll have different kinds of railings where, let me see if I can see a good example, something like this, or this one back here, where it's just this repetitive picket, and you can really extend this as long as you want and just continue to copy these pickets along the way, as many as you want. Same thing with this X one here. Or we can get into something a little more specialized, where something like this, you would essentially create this kind of component here. And again, this one is a component to where maybe this one is meant to be not necessarily an ongoing thing, but you have like this very specialized decorative kind of piece. Again, it's really all in design, but the point being is that this centerpiece here is built as a component. so that if I edit this one gets edited. So it's just, again, making sure you think about how you want to put this together from a long-term perspective. That's just really the big part of this discussion. And one of the nice things about building these as components, that project that we were working on with, I forget what was it, Bannon, I believe it was, or Bannigan, we needed to switch out the railings. What was really nice is it was using similar railings, just slightly different design, where we had something like this, but we wanted to change out the infill of it. So even if we have multiples of these things, let's say, I'm going to make all of these unique. I was able to come in here and edit the one, whatever, make these unique as well. Edit the one to whatever it needed to be. I'm just going to make something up. And as you can see, we're able to populate the rest of the railings pretty quickly. So that's just the nice thing about making railings into components, is for future editing or whatever it is you need to do. You edit one, you edit them all. Anyway, I'm not really designing railings right now, but just getting the idea that just trying to hammer home the idea of just really thinking about how you build these pieces of what should be groups and what should be components. That's all. So with that said, let me see if I can open up one more drawing. Again, I'm going to go to my library collections, and I'm actually going to open up this one, columns and piers, simply because I was wanted to show you, and I think I've showed before, that we have some of these columns that are made. This was made quite some time ago and really needs to be updated a little bit, but there's still some decent stuff in here. But I wanted to show that you can also grab, maybe a pier that would want to be used as part of the column, or excuse me, the railing. So I'll grab that pier, and maybe I'll grab, what's a good railing? Maybe we'll go with this decorative one back here. Again, I'm just copying and pasting it in. And just to show you, make sure you guys understand, what we're looking at. As you can see, we have these lines here. As you can imagine, those lines are the balcony. And in fact, if I hide this, that's hiding the trim around the balcony. And so really I want to focus on the balcony itself. And so I'm just going to hide the trim just for a second. I don't necessarily do that when I'm working, but just to be a little bit more specific in what I'm doing. So I grabbed a pier and I grabbed this railing, and right now I'm just centering these things onto this balcony. As you can see, what I'm lining up here, the trim technically would overhang the balcony. The column and the balcony itself would line up. So I was trying to show with this line. You can see that these lines all line up, and that's how you would really want to place it. Maybe we'll grab a second one. I'm going to grab it by this face, not by the trim, and copy it to here. And then if you wanted to, you can always put like a half return column against the wall. And as always, you know me, I like to turn I like items into a group, so I wanted to work with this railing as a group, so I'm going to turn that into a group so that I can isolate it. And then from here, I'm just going to grab by the center and center it on my pier. So a couple tricks in adding railings in, specifically adding railings in very quickly. In fact, I noticed I just want to raise my pier up 6 inches because I typically like my piers to be, or the railing to come right to the bottom of the trim. And so I actually need to come down just a little bit. Looks like about another inch. I think that'll be good. So usually this handrail piece, you can see it's a group. There's no real reason to make it a component, so I leave it as a group. There's a couple different ways I could stretch this to the pier. I can edit my group and use my push-pull and bring it to here. I can select, if you see what I'm doing, I'm selecting this face, and you can see that everything is turning blue, and then I can move it, which will essentially stretch it, which is doing the exact same thing as push-pull. So that's one way you can do it. A little bit of a quicker way is, instead of, and I'll do it down here, and again, this one's going to be a group. As you can see, it's edit group. Instead of going in here and individually moving these, I'm actually going to stay outside of the group, and I'm going to scale it. And if you see, I'm sure you guys all know how to use the scale tool, but just a quick discussion on it. You have these 9 different grips, and there's 9 different ones at each end and in the middle. And we can talk more about scaling later if you had questions on what these are. But specifically what I want to look at is this center one. And if you can see all the way down to the other end, all the way back here, when I grab this grip here, you see that it's kind of small, but there's another red box that lights up, which means it's a mirrored grip. Now, if I try to scale it, it's basically, if I pull it, let me see if I can zoom out, I'm only scaling the one side, or if I grab the other one, it scales just the other side. And the trick, that if you guys don't know, if you hold control, so I'm going to start scaling it and hold control, you see that grip moves to the center right here. And now I can scale both sides at the same time. And so by having put the railing in the middle of the balcony to start off with, I was essentially setting myself up to allow myself to scale things that way and allow for easy adjustment for my railings. So I'll do that again just in case you guys didn't catch it. It's a pretty simple thing, and I'm sure you guys already know it, but again, just trying to show as many tips as I can. I'm going to scale it by here, hit control, and then you can see I'm basically touching this edge of where I want it to scale to. Even though it's going through the trim, I'm okay with it because I really just want to be consistent and make everything go to the edge of the pier. And that's just the way that I work. It's all about finding your consistent way of working so you know where things go to, just that kind of idea. So from here, I'm just going to grab, looking for the pattern. I'm just going to grab here, and I'm not grabbing this one because you can see every 4th one we have a leg coming down for structure, if you will. And so now I can just copy an additional set over, and it looks like I could probably grab just one more and have it fit. And all I'm doing is just move and copy. Again, pretty basic stuff. And so just doing this exact same thing on the other side. And there you have it. There's, the beginning of our railing. And so to do the next thing, I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning, but my grouping of the railing, I actually want to make it a component. I keep it as a group when I initially bring it in because I'm going to make several of them. But this collection of railing parts, I'm going to turn into a component. And even though I won't make an exact copy of this, and I don't necessarily need this front piece as a component, the trick is that what I'm really going to do is copy it. If you see, I'm just giving myself some guide points. I did a line from center to center and center to center. So I'm just grabbing now by that center point of line to this center point of line, which would then allow me to rotate it. And so I know it's exactly lined up. Does that make sense? Everybody see what I just did there? I mean, you don't necessarily need to draw those lines. It's just whatever is easier for you to find center points. Sometimes it's easier for me to just draw lines that way. But now I have this railing that's perfectly centered. And so I'm going to copy this railing, and this is where creating components of the railing group works. now I can have a second one here because these, the left and right, are going to be identical. And this way, if I ever adjust the railing, I know that the left and right will adjust, and I only need to adjust one side. The last thing I'm going to do, and more than likely it won't ever affect anything, but just to do it, I'm actually going to scale this by -1. And what that's going to do, if you guys have ever used the scale by -1 trick, it's basically just mirroring something. And what that does, in fact, I'm going to undo, and this way I'll show you. For whatever reason, if you ever have something that is, I mean, these railings are symmetrical, so it's not really showing off anything that you would need it for, but by putting this here and scaling by -1, I just got to move this back now real quick. It allows the quote-unquote front face to always be facing out, because you see this now is on the left side where this is now on the right side, and all that is just letting me be consistent with the way the railing is facing. And that would really only ever come to play if the quote-unquote front of the railing was slightly different from the back, and most times it's not, but it's just one of those good habits to get into, so you don't ever have to worry about it later. Say that again? Like rotate it around? Yeah, flip along. Exactly. This is the other way that you can mirror things. I actually have never gotten in the habit of using it. And again, if you have, no problem. I typically work with the axes turned off, although I have set Shift A to be my turn axes on and off. But with my axes turned off, I never know which way is the green and which way is the red. And I would have to just take another step of turning the axes on to see which one is green and which one's red. So that's the only reason why I don't use it. But if you're comfortable with it, by all means, it's built in for you to use it that way. So that's great. So now that I have both sides of the railings copied, I just want to come in here and edit. I want to make the side railings unique, so make those unique. And by hitting Shift H, again, that's my shortcut command for turning model on and off, I can see which of these pickets I don't need. So I'm just going to grab the pickets I don't need and delete them. Oop, one too many. And then I can actually grab both the top and the bottom rail at the same time, and I'm going to scale by this center piece again, turning my model back on so I can reference back to my pier. And again, I'm holding Control, and you can see that I just scaled the top and bottom at the same time, and now I have a shortened rail. So, that quickly I was able to create my railings that are tailored to this particular balcony. Some other quick things about railings. I can't remember if these are perfectly set up the way I want yet, but the way I've talked about windows previously, I actually have this railing material that eventually most, if not all, unless there's specialized materials, will be painted this railing white. And the theory is going to be the same as windows, that when you bring it in, all your railings will theoretically already be pre-painted. So if you see, if I turn this pink, all these that turn pink are painted that color. As you see, there's still some more that I haven't done yet and just need to go back and fix those. But the idea is that once they're in there, I can now just adjust that color or replace that color, and I paint all my railings without having to do a whole lot of work. So it's just another one of those things to be aware of. I think I showed you guys this last week. I know I showed you the Profile Builder plugin, but what's nice is it actually does, it does a really great job for railings. Like, you can have these preset railings, and again, I'm pretty sure I showed you this last week, but I'll just show you real quick in here. You can have some crazy railing lines. So say this is the outline of my balcony, this line and this curve. I could just say build this railing along this path. Click of a button, there's my rail. And it's pretty easy to set these up once you really dive into it. And that's what all of these railings down here are. You can see this one is just that one that we just built. But I also have some of these other railings already being worked on. And I think it's like I can reload that railing with this railing. So you can see just this quickly, if you build them using this parametric modeling, I can really change out these railings pretty quickly. So I'll select this design and switch it over. So hopefully you guys are seeing that, just how quickly you can build these railings. Yes. Yep. Sure. So the question is why this particular railing, I have posts that are occurring every so often versus just grab it. This one, there's a post at the beginning and the end, and it's basically in the coding of how this railing was coded, which in fact there will actually be 3 if I'm not mistaken. Nope, there's just the 2. This is it's basically within this plugin. You talk about how to build the rail. So you're giving it a set of rules, and right here you can see we're dealing with the end post, and these are all the rules for the end post. So you can give it a start setback, junction setbacks. You can give different setbacks, and you can see that this infill is not checked. So if I check it, I can say I want spacing, and right now the default is every 8 feet. So I can say I'm going to apply the attributes to the railing now, and you can see now it applied a post every 8 feet. If I wanted to say, you know what, I only want it every 6 feet, you can apply that, and you'll see it'll adjust everything. So you can see, just say that again. Yeah, so you can build a railing specific to your needs, although you try to set up general rules to get it to work. And I think you can actually say, I don't want infill, and but I just want start and end and junctions. So if I do this, I'm going to do a square, and you can see that it does it at all the times it makes a sharp turn. So the other one was a curve, and that's why it didn't do it. But if I do this, and then say add a curve here, and then ran this, you'll see that it'll happen at all these juncture points, and then ends. So it's just the rules that you set up for how the railing works, that's all. And we could definitely talk more about this plugin more. It's just a really powerful plugin. I tend not to use it as much as I probably should because I don't always have the time to set up the rules that I want it to follow. It's sometimes just easier for me to manually build things. But what's nice is I'll just show one more thing on this and not spend too much time on these railings. But if you see, I'm pulling this up in the z-axis. So if you can see, I'm actually going vertical as if I'm building a staircase. And what's really nice now is if I select that and build this, it actually builds my railing moving up along a staircase. So it's just, there's definitely times where it has a lot of power and something I want to get into more and get you guys into more. So anyway, PB stands for Profile Builder. That's the name of the plugin. And it comes with a profile builder and an assembly builder. So you can build, use it to make trims, or you can do like a grouping of trims and components to make an assembly. So that's all that is. Just going to grab my railing and put it inside my house block. So any other questions on railings? I mean, they're pretty straightforward, but again, I just want to make sure I showed them. We'll get into some materials later, but that's, you know, looking pretty good there. No, you are correct. If we're doing railing options, and it's something we're going to dive into deeper later on, but it's easy enough just to show you. So I'm going to bring my layers over here. I'm going to add 2 layers, and we'll call this one option 1, or if you need to get specific, you can call it railing option 1, and then I'll call this one rail option 2. And on my entity info, this group that we made, I'm just going to put it on railing option 1. And let's hide this. And then for sake of time, I'm just going to build that other railing using that builder. We'll grab this, grab my profile builder, grab this railing, and there you go. So now we have option 2, so we'll call this one railing option 2. And I'm going to unhide. So we have both railing options now. The one bad thing about adding layers within SketchUp is all the layers, all the scenes have that layer turned on. There's no way to add a layer with it turned off globally. I wish there's a way to do it. And there's plugins I've seen, but they don't work as well as I would like. They're not as easy. But with that said, it takes a little bit of time, but it's not that bad. You just kind of now have to manually create your scene option tab. So this option, or the scene 1, I would come in here, and if you can see my scenes tab, I'm just going to add an A after my 001, and then I'm going to turn off my railing 2 and update, and then I'm going to add, and then I was going to switch railing 1 for railing 2. I'll update, and then call this one 001B. So now if I go between 001A and B, you see that I can change railing options. Again, the bad piece is I would have to come in and do that for scene 2. If you're crunched for time, scene 2, you don't see it, so you could ignore it. The only bad thing is if you go to scene 2 and then move around, then you have both railing options on. Not a huge deal, it's just something to be aware of. You know, your scene 3 you would adjust, and you just have to adjust all the ones in which it was visible and or all of them, including if you're doing, say, you know, your elevation images. You'd have to do like a right A and a right B, but it's the exact same process that we just showed right here. So that's how you would do different railing options. I'm going to actually delete this. And if you guys haven't, just a quick thing to show since I'm doing it, I'm going to delete these options. And so to delete railing, I don't want this railing 2 anymore. So I'm going to I'm highlighting the layer, and I'm going to delete it. And I want to say delete contents because I don't want that option anymore. So I'm deleting it. I'm going to turn on my railing option 1. I don't want this layer anymore, but I want to keep the rail itself. So I'm going to delete that layer, but this time I'm going to say move contents to current layer instead of delete contents. So my current layer is 0, so it just puts it back on the 0 layer. and it gets rid of that. And then same thing, I can come to my scene tab, get rid of scene 1B, and change my 1 back to my 1A back to 1. So yeah, so let me just move these out of the way so we can see. There we go. So let's see, what else can we add? We've already talked about railings. Oh, just another, this is a great one for design purposes. As you can see, there's no thickness to these two back here. These are just planes. These are actually PNG textures. So you can grab this and stretch this as long as you need to. And it's just a PNG texture, and all you're doing is just stretching the texture out. So it's a great way to add detailed railings in without having to do a whole lot of work. And this is just another version of it. Be aware that you can't scale it, because then, as you see, you're scaling the texture. If you wanted to scale it, you can come inside so you're at the surface level, and now you can scale it. In fact, no, you can't. I'm sorry. Although you can scale it, and again, we're going to get into more materials later, but you can go back to, I believe, reset position. But you're just going through a whole lot more issues than you really need to. So that's just to be aware. There's these additional railings for quick studies if you wanted to. So I'm gonna open up another file. We're gonna go. Let's look. I'm not gonna put any on, but I'll show them to you. I don't have a huge collection of these, but we have some chimney and some cupola details. I'm going to try not to open up too many. My SketchUp takes a while to open, so I think because of all the plugins I have. Nope. I'll close that. So these are just some various chimney details I've done over the years, and again, I need to get. There's a lot more I've done that I don't have in here. And yes, I did build every one of these rocks, but it looks great in renderings. So anyway, just some fireplaces and chimneys kinds of thing. So another one, I have gutters. We don't need to talk about gutters, self-explanatory. In fact, I'm just going to open it because I will show this one. This one is made to be a lot like, I use the metaphor all the time of Legos. You have these corner pieces, you have the straight runs, you have your connection downspouts. And so, and I believe these are all just groups because you're going to edit them. I think the corners might be components because the components are meant to be moved around to the corner. You know, so you can put that there. And then this one happens to have an end cap just as a piece that you can put on, or you can come in here and using my new favorite plugin, the Stretch by Area, I'm just going to grab this whole thing and I can stretch it all the way, you know, back to here. And I just, you know, made the gutter bigger. So just to be aware, here's some, you know, gutter pieces if you ever need to put gutters on, and a rain spout or a rain chain that I built to put on there. And yes, I built every actual chain piece. But again, looks great in renderings. But the thing is once you build them, they're there, and that's the idea of having what I call this boneyard. No, the rain chains are real. Like you just, yeah, you don't have the gutter spout. You just have an opening with the rain chain, so when the water hits it, it what's the water property? I forget what it's called. That water basically sticks together and will just stick to this and run down the chain. Yeah. So here's my collection of lights. Again, going to be pretty self-explanatory. I'm just going to grab one. All these should be components. And then just go around and wherever you need to put them, you put them. Some of them will have like this decorative wall, wall piece. Others will be made like this one has that same chain that I made before, so you can hang it from a ceiling if you need to. All kinds of different decorative wall pieces. This one's made to sit on top of a column. So there's all different ones in here, and I'm continually trying to add to this because we're always looking for different kinds of lights. And I actually had a project that needed a bell, so I just threw the bell into here. I'm not going to get too crazy in adding these lights because there's nothing too special about adding the lights in. Just a fun piece to show for those of you that get into using Lumion. You can see I actually modeled a light bulb in here, and if I were to select the material, you see that this is already layered with what I'm calling emissive material. Obviously in SketchUp it doesn't do anything, but what's nice is coming into Lumion, you can just select this and make this material emissive, and all of my lights have this same emissive material, so every one of them becomes emissive within Lumion. Again, it's just one of those things where it's a little bit of extra work, but it's a little bit of extra work once, and it's there and becomes consistent across the board. And once we get into Lumion renderings, you'll see why that's a nice little feature. But again, just something to be aware that it's in there. And plus, even in SketchUp, it looks nice that you can see the light in there. Just a little bit more of a detail that's there. So that's railings, that's lights, and probably the next, or probably the biggest one, but after railings would be shutters, and we can look at shutters and talk about the way I build them. So we have all different kinds of shutter styles, plus we have the Bahama shutters and the awnings, as well as a straight Bahama. We'll grab this one. So I'm just going to, again, just copy, and we'll come into here. And before I paste it, just like before when we talked about the trims, you could either put the trim outside of the window block or inside of the window block, and it all depends on your model and depends on how many times that window is replicated, and if that same window throughout your house will get the same shutter or not. And so that's just going to be more of a call by you. It's definitely nice to be able to put it on inside of the window, because then you're just doing it once. And so to quickly go through one, the way I do it is, you can see I'm grabbing this bottom left corner right here and putting that bottom left corner. Let me turn the model on. You can see I'm putting that right up against the wall in that corner. And then from there I'll adjust what I need to. So if I go to edit this, my pair of shutters is actually in a group. It's not a component. I haven't come across a real reason to make it a component, so I just leave it as a group. But each individual shutter itself is a component, so that if I edit one, I'm editing the other side. Again, I'm just keeping the shutters together by grouping them. And then from here, I was going to make sure that this is properly placed against the window there. And I'm going to do a quick measurement. I can see that this needs to come down 1 foot. So coming inside this group, using my new favorite tool, I'm just grabbing this and dropping it down the foot. And then here, I'm just going to select all of this mid stuff. I'm just moving it down 6 inches just to recenter everything. And there you go. There's shutters on these two windows. but you can see on the front it might not work as well because these shutters are overlapping. So that's where you need to start thinking about, do I want to put the shutters on the window or in the window? And maybe from a design perspective, I see that this window, maybe we want to separate these windows out a little bit more. I can't remember what the plan is doing, if we can do that or not, but we're just having fun with the model. So I'm just going to move these over and keep the shutter on it. And with that, I'm just going to adjust my roof over a little bit as well. So again, that's shutters. And really the rest of them you can see will be the exact same. Just as something to be aware of, these louvered shutters. Again, these louvers are individually created. You can see that they're all their own louver. It's an actual louver. And you can see that the louvers are components. So if I edit one, they all edit. So that's something very important to be aware of if you need to make another one that's bigger. Say I have a skinny window there, but this one is going to be part of a wider window, so I need a wider shutter. You see, I just made this shutter unique, so I'm no longer editing this, but if I edit this louver, these louvers pop back up because they're all components. It's just something to be aware of, that I need to select all these and make those unique, so that when I pull this out, say 12 inches, whoops, and then I can just select that and pull it out 12 inches. Make sense? It's just one of those things to be aware of. So that's how you can make a shutter unique and build it and add on to it. Any questions on shutters? Again, most of these detailing things are pretty straightforward right now, but yeah, I just want to make sure. And so, we could go through and add shutters to all the windows that we would or wouldn't want to. If I add more, I'll put them on later. There's no real reason to do that with you guys right now, because I think you got the gist of it. Let's see, what other exterior details? If I go to open, so we already looked at brackets and rafters and chimneys, columns, gutters. Maybe I'll get to screening in a second. We did lights, we did railings, shutters. Siding, we're going to do layers. Spires, pretty straightforward. Trellises, this just has a lot of trellis pieces, so if you need to build a trellis, you can start here and grab a trellis. Window details are the trims that we put around the window. Let's look at wall details. These are kind of specialized things, and you'll see them in a second. So this is trying to just put together different ways that I've built coins or stone on the corners. This one's actually pretty neat. It's a really nice texture. This one's simply done by texture, nothing else. It's a pretty nice texture, has a nice rounded edge to it, versus physically building the coin and just texturing it. This has a wall inset, same as you would do with any window, except it has a tile background with, you can probably see it in here, wooden trellis with some ivy growing on it. So if you ever needed to add in some of these details, we don't do a lot of this kind of architecture much, but which is both good and bad, because doing this kind of detailing can really bog you down. And building these things are not necessarily easy, so that's why I'm always trying to collect them. Yeah, so since we got a little bit of time, I'll go into lattice and screening. Sometimes we've had to show an ocean reef. We actually had to show lattice work in particular places, and so I think This one's actually pretty nice. If you can't tell, this is actually a PNG material, so this is just a texture. And so this is a great way of doing it, and I use this one a lot. So it's an easy way of doing it. And as a, you should know by now, if I can do an image of it, I can also like to build it. So this is actually a physically built lattice work. And it's built so that I can use my solid tools and cut this to the size I need, and just different lattice types. So if you ever need to get into lattice work, for the most part, this one is the one I go to right away, because it's just the easiest way to do it. But if I needed to do like a really, really nice rendering and you see the lattice work, I'll tend to build the lattice. Same thing with screen enclosures. You know, sometimes we need to show the screen and even different options of screens or whatever. So I have a lot of screen components. I'm going to zoom in. This is, let's see if you can see it in a second, another PNG material that does a pretty good job representing screen. So this is just pretty basic. It's just a frame that I can expand as long as I want, and then expand my screen to match. So it's all pretty straightforward, but just know that there are screen parts already put together, so you don't have to go searching for things. And obviously this one is a screen door built into it, so if you have a door, all that kind of stuff. Any real questions on this stuff? Again, today's pretty straightforward for the most part. So any other questions on exterior detailing, or any exterior detailing that you would like to see that I haven't shown? Sure. Sure. Okay. So the the replacement of components. So one of the things we've talked previously is the origin point within components and how important it is to keep it in the same place. And in all honesty, like 90% of the time, the origin of the component really doesn't matter. It's just good practice to be consistent in how you do it. So like this light, you can see my origin point is right here. That's just where it's going to show the axes. So if I built my lights correctly, so let me open up my lights again. And I wanted to switch out all my lights. So let me see. Let's say I had, you know, a whole bunch of these copied around my model. The owner really likes lights. He's afraid of the dark, I guess. And then we wanted to do a different light fixture. So we want to do something like this. So you can see my insertion point. This one was built properly in that I have my insertion point right here where it attaches to the wall. So what I'm going to do is I want this one to replace this light. So it's going to replace this light. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to right click on the component that I want, the new one, and go to Save As. And I always keep a what I call a delete folder. I think we've talked about before that anything that goes in here is not going to be saved. It can be deleted at any time. It's just going to be a placeholder. So I'm going to save this light into my delete folder. Go back to my model. And now I can right click on this light and go to reload. And it's going to pull up where I last saved that file. And I now can reload it with this light number 2. And so you see every one of those lights just got reloaded. And you can see that the origin point was kept the same. This is where it was put in. And so that's where it's going to reload it. Now, once these are in, maybe these lights want to be up a little higher just because of the nature of the way they're built. This one's a down hanging light versus the other one was an up hanging light, if you will. But for example, let's see, let's make one that, or let's replace it with something that was not built well. So this one's a great example. I don't have the origin point in the right place. See how this origin point is hanging off in space? So this one definitely needs to be fixed. So I'm going to right click and just say save as, and again I'm just going to save it. And if I didn't look for where the origin point was and just assumed that I had built this correctly to start off with, now when I come in here and go to reload with this outdoor lantern, you see I get these weird results because it's holding the origin point in the same place. And so now these lights are floating inside my model somewhere. I think it might be inside the wall. Yeah. So they're actually inside my wall because it was holding that origin point true. So just real quick, I'm going to fix this one. And I'm just going to grab it by where I want the origin point to be. And there's two ways. Sometimes I think it's easier to physically move the model within. But I'll show you the way you're supposed to do it in a second. Because there's always the way you're supposed to do it and then the way that sometimes is easier. I'm actually, now that I changed the origin point, I'm going to re-save out this outdoor lantern and then come back in here and right click and say reload with outdoor lantern. And now you see my origin point is back to where it's supposed to be. So it's just the biggest thing you need to be aware of if you do this material replacement is, or not material replacement, excuse me, component replacement is the origins. It always gets reloaded by its origin. This method actually gets very, very useful when you get into very detailed landscape plans. If you actually get a landscape drawing from a landscape architect, and if they happen to send you CAD files, which is fantastic, they have all of their blocks for their landscape. You can bring their CAD blocks into your SketchUp model and then click on their oak tree symbol and say replace with oak tree 3D model, and every one of theirs gets repopulated. So you can actually populate your SketchUp model very, very quickly with accurate landscape that way. And that's something we're going to talk about once we get into site design and landscape stuff later on. But just one of those things to be aware of. I want to get this lantern back in real quick. So anyway, that's how you reload. In case you guys didn't know that, it's definitely a great tool. I don't need all of these. I'm going to eventually repopulate this with these lights, put them around where I want them to go. Yeah, so you can see we have quite a bit of detail in here. I mean, there's really not too much else other than if you wanted to actually detail things like adding more trim. Say there's a chair rail that occurs around here. Whatever, you can add more trim in, but there's not really different trim or details that we haven't really talked about that really should cover just about everything. So again, unless you guys got any additional questions, I think that should be it for today. Say that again? Yep, no problem. So I think we're going, because of the way the scheduling and everything worked, we're actually going to get together again next week. So I'll email everybody on that just to keep this thing moving. And we're going to get into something fun doing 3D roofs. Again, it's one of those things that you can paint on, but I think if you have the time, it just looks so much better to get 3D roofs on. So we're really moving along. I hope your models are looking good. I happen to see Leron, so he's getting bonus points for homework. All right, guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.